Hi, I'm going to do a channel today about creating the geometry which underlies the physical field. So I want to be more effective at manifesting my material desires. So I went back and I watched 3 of my past channel sessions, because the channel session I did yesterday was about change, and their recommendation was for me to go back and re-watch these other channels that I'd done before on manifesting. And to my surprise, in all 3 of them I spoke about the geometry, which I didn't realise that I had. I thought I'd only done it 1 time, but apparently I've done it 3 times. So I printed out some photos of some things that I would like to have in my life, and then I did an inspired drawing this morning, which is, here it is. So I did this drawing this morning, and I really have no idea what it means. I just tried to draw something being completely guided and inspired rather than thinking about it. So I didn't think about it at all. I just pretty much just did whatever was in my... The first thing that came to my head is what I put on the paper, and I ended up with something like this. Okay, so this was my attempt to draw the geometry. And I thought, well, if I'm going to try and draw the geometry, which in the channel it said you don't have to draw the geometry, you don't have to see the geometry, but I'm going to put some photos. I've got some pictures that I'm going to put on my wall, you know, of my representing my material desires. And what I would like to do is I'd like to have something up there also to represent the geometry. So I just drew this inspired picture this morning, and I figured, well, why don't I channel on that specifically, on the geometry specifically. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this today. So the question is, please give some guidance on creating geometry for manifesting physical material desires. Please provide some guidance on creating geometry for manifesting physical material desires. Alright, so let's see what happens. Greetings and thank you for the question. How can you create the geometry which will manifest your material and physical desires? We'll start by saying that you are always creating geometry. So you are a creative being, but it is geometry that you create. And then there is a process of manifestation, which is a default quality of the matrix of this 3D reality in which you reside, that will form the physical representation of the geometry that you're creating. So in a way, you don't create physical manifestation, but instead you create the geometry, and then the physical manifestation assembles itself on the geometry. So to create geometry which is representative of the physical and material desires that you have, it is first necessary to become very clear on what those physical and material desires are. So take some time to do some investigation and actually have a clear idea. Find photos, descriptions, first-hand accounts of the experiences of these things which you wish to also experience and possess. And then once you have a familiarity and you can see and imagine yourself owning these things, having these experiences. So it is important that you don't just imagine these things, you don't just imagine a car, you don't just imagine a house, but you also imagine yourself driving that car as the owner, living in that house as the owner, being on that vacation. It is important that in the vision that you hold of these things, that you are also in that vision. Otherwise, you will manifest the creation of those, but perhaps outside of your possessive field. So it is essential that it is integrated into your self-identity. So you are the person that owns the car. You are the person that has that vacation. You are the person who lives and owns that home. And then once you have a clear vision, then it is possible to create a geometry which is going to be the template layer or the blueprint on which these realities can assemble themselves. So to hold the geometry, it is enough to know that you are creating the geometry. You do not need to necessarily see clearly exactly what that geometry is, because that geometry is forming in a field which is beyond the physical senses. So it is not something that you could see, or even something that you could imagine in a way which would be truly representative or truly precisely reflective of what the mechanism of the geometry and the way that it exists could be accurately done. Instead, it is enough to be aware that you are creating the geometry, and that the geometry you create is a precise blueprint for the manifestation of your material desires. This is sufficient, and no more than this needs to be done. You are creating geometry non-stop. It is during your waking moments. It is a inherent part of the process of the energetic being integrating into the physical experience. It is an essential step that cannot be bypassed. And so, when you are conscious, you are creating geometry. This is inevitable in the process. So creating geometry is not something which is foreign or a struggle, because you are doing it already. understanding the process is really what will make the biggest difference to how successfully you create the manifestation of your material desires. So while you have asked us how to create the geometry, doing this alone is not enough, because you must also, through your understanding of the process, remove those beliefs which are creating the material field that you now enjoy, however wish was different. And by enjoy we mean experience. So if your material field now is not truly reflective of what it is that you wish to experience, then accept that it is reflective of the beliefs which you hold. And so if you wish to open up the field of potential so that you can begin manifesting a reality more reflective of your desires, then accept your holding beliefs which are contrary to the manifestation of your desires, and those beliefs must be released. It is essential that they are relinquished and then replaced with new beliefs which become the lens through which the geometry is broadcast. When the flow of presence, which is real-time streaming from the higher self, is broadcast into the physical field, it will pass through lenses of belief. As long as the mind is still present as identity in some way, then it holds beliefs which are assumptions based on historical data. And those belief lenses, if inaccurate, create distortions of the real-time streaming of the higher self as presence. And so when the higher self presence emanates into your physical field, these distortion lenses will create a material experience which you may find to be not what you wish to experience. So, if you observe your physical field and you see it is not the way you would like it to be, and you have a clear enough idea of what it is what your physical field would like to be, and yet you can see there is marked difference between that desire and between the actual experience, then it points to a belief lens which is creating distortion. And that distortion is the experience that you live. So, except there is a belief lens which is distorting the emanation of the higher self, real-time download, spontaneous emanation. So this belief lens is a rerouting to mind to a degree, but it is not a rerouting to mind for conscious curation. but instead it is a belief lens which has become subconscious. And so it is not a conscious processing, but instead is more insidious and has implanted itself in a subconscious level, where the mind is inevitably filtered through that belief lens without conscious awareness that this is what's occurring. It is not essential that you understand what that belief is, and it is not essential that you go on a journey of discovery of that belief, although that is useful information to have. Instead, the recognition that you seem to be holding a subconscious belief which is creating a distortion on the abundant nature and quality of the higher self. You are an infinite being, energetically eternal, and so you create in the physical field in an abundant way. However, you experience a lack of abundance because it is the lack of abundance which you are creating abundantly. We realize we have covered this ground before, but it is important to understand and to grasp if you are to successfully create the geometry which is a more accurate representation of the material field that you would like to experience. So, accepting this recognition that you are holding beliefs in the subconscious mind which do not receive conscious attention, but can be deduced as being present by observation of the material experience that you have, then make the decision from the higher self perspective to release these beliefs, these distortion lenses, and replace them with a reflection of the true quality of the highest self essence of who you actually are. You are an eternal, immortal, invulnerable individuation of the love of the One, with an infinite capacity to manifest material desires. This is the true description of who you are as the energetic being. And if you look about your material field and you see lack, then clearly it's a demonstration that there is a distortion through erroneous belief on this actual quality of who you are. Because you are a being of infinite abundance, if you are not experiencing infinite abundance in the way that you would like to experience, then clearly this is due to erroneous belief. And if you are not aware what that belief is, then clearly that is due to the belief being subconscious. And so, without your recognition, your higher self flow is being processed through these erroneous belief lenses. So make the decision to release those belief lenses. Decide and confirm that they do not serve you anymore. Whatever purpose they have served in the past is now complete. Give thanks for the role they played in helping you to become further awakened into the realization of who you truly are. But release them with love and recognition that their part has been played and they are no longer required. So with peaceful gratitude, release them. And at the moment of release, if you are able to do it with a sense of complete detachment, love and acceptance, then they shall disintegrate and become nothing more than a memory of a time when you were a different version of self. And then at this moment of disintegration, when you go through this process of recognition, acceptance, love and gratitude, release, disintegration, immediately bring your awareness and recognition to the true quality of self. And that is, you are an infinite being with the capacity to create your material desires at will. And implant that, maintain that, go to that often in your internal contemplation and reaffirm that this is the true nature of self. You are the infinite, invulnerable, immortal individuation of the love of the One, with the capacity to manifest your material desires. And when this has become the anchor point from which you now hold your presence, it can be shaped into a new lens of belief. A translucent lens which allows the natural, organic, spontaneous flow of the energetic self to be broadcast into the physical field with a high degree of authenticity and clarity. And now from this place, having done what we have described up until this moment, it is time to be focused on the geometry which you create. So if you are clear in what it is that you desire to manifest, and you are open to the true nature of the infinite self and the habitual erroneous belief lenses of the past have been released, and you are born anew in this moment with a new potential, then you can ask the geometry to form, because you are the geometric field. You are your life. You are not living your life, but you are your life. All of your life is an emanation from self. Everything that you see, everything that you experience, everything that you hear is a manifestation of self. You are not defined by the borders of the body. But you are all of it. All of experience is you. All of reality is you. If it is in your conscious awareness, if it is within the field of your awareness, then it is you. And so to create the geometry, it is not something that you create externally, but instead it is something that you create within. You become the geometry of that which you desire to manifest. And so you ask for the geometry to be formed. Ask and ye shall receive. You do not need to construct the geometry as a team of engineers and building crew would construct a building. You do not need to do it in this way, because the geometry is based on your loving intent. Your loving intent is enough for the geometry to form. So with loving intent and a clear vision of that which it is you wish to manifest, ask that the geometry be formed. Ask that it be formed with precision, which is accurately representative of that which you desire to manifest. And then once you have done this and it feels to your satisfaction, and we would say, don't spend too much time on this. The loving intent and request is sufficient if you have a clear visualization of that which it is you wish to materially manifest. If you spend too much time in the process of requesting the geometry, then it will become too much of a mind activity, and you will begin to create distortion through belief of the mind. In this process, we wish to keep the mind solely as a facilitator and not allow it to elevate itself in reverence to the point where it becomes one of the engineers designing the geometry, which it will want to do. So don't allow that to happen. And then it is time to transition this geometry into a belief lens. The geometry will form very, very quickly through loving intent and the request based on the clear vision that you have. So once this process is completed, which takes not much time at all, we want to now implant this geometry into the mechanism so that it becomes a new subconscious component of the manifestation mechanism. So very similar to the way that the distortion lens of the erroneous belief was in place, we now instead are going to create a belief lens in which is etched this geometry. So at the junction, the coalescence between the energetic self, the moment of spontaneous emanation into the physical field. And this imperceptible layer between the two is where the geometric field is found. And so at this junction is where you implant this lens, or shall we call it a belief lens, on which you have etched the geometry representative of the physical field you wish to experience. And again, loving intent is sufficient. Just understand that this is the way you were designed. You were created for this process to occur this way. So it does not require you to be reading the instructions over and over, trying to make sense of how it's done. It is an inherent knowing in the system. And so from the higher self perspective, when you have masterfully understood that you are the higher self puppeteering the mind and body, then no more is required than to internally recognize this lens now has on it etched the geometry representative of your material desires. And that lens is being placed in the aperture through which you spontaneously emanate at the moment of transition from energetic to physical field. And holographically, you will now broadcast into the template field the geometric map, which is representative of the material desires you wish to manifest. This is the process. This is the mechanism, and it has been designed for conscious control through self-mastery and recognition of self as the energetic being that is puppeteering the servant. And the servant is the mind and the body. And the extension of that is the life you live is equally the servant, because it is all you. It is all being manifested within you. The mind, the body, the personality, and the greater external physical life is all occurring within you. So place the lens at this aperture, and once it is there, and you have followed these preceding steps as described, then you can take your attention away from it. And in the moments where you feel that you are thinking in a way which is habitual of the old way you used to think, which created the geometry, which manifested the reality you don't desire, then return to the recognition that this is on the basis of erroneous beliefs which are no longer integrated into the conceptualization of self. It is just an echo. It is just a habit. It is not you anymore. And so instantly release. And when release, allow that energetic release to dissipate, disintegrate, become transmuted into an addition of awareness and understanding of self. And at that moment, reinforce the understanding that you are an infinite being, and as such you are able to manifest your material desires in an infinite way, because this is the true story of who you are. And then hold the image again of what it is that you wish to desire: the house, the car, the relationship, the experience, whatever it is, these things that you have well defined previously. Very briefly, just hold those visions again, clarified, unchanging. And this is why it's important that before you begin this process, that you have a very clear idea what it is that you desire, so that as you progress through this process over months, that the imagery is not continually morphing. Because if it continually morphs, then you are increasing the amount of time it takes for those manifestations to become present in your reality, because the geometry is continually changing. And as the geometry changes, then the physical reality that has been assembling itself on the geometry also has to compensate for the changes in the geometry. So it increases the amount of time. So have a very, very clear image of what it is that you desire before you begin these processes. And then once you have a very clear idea, then you are ready to do what we have been discussing so far. So, going back to what to do on the time is when you find yourself thinking in a way which is reminiscent of the old version of you. And at that point we were about to say, you revisit the imagery of what it is that you desire. And then you again give thanks for the geometry. So it is not recreating the geometry, because the geometry has already been created. Instead, when we revisit this, to touch it, to tend to it, to water it, we give thanks that the geometry already exists. And we recognize that geometry has already been etched in the lens, which is at the junction point between the energetic and the physical, in the template layer. The lens is there, and the flow of the higher self, when it crosses this junction, is going through that lens. So broadcast into the template layer is the blueprint of the reality you wish to manifest. And once you have completed this very quick process, this reaffirmation, which can be done in moments once you become skilled at how it is done, release it. Because the mechanism does not require your continuous attention. Release, and then continue about your everyday life. And only in those moments, when you find yourself thinking or believing in a way which is reflective of lack or an abundance of the absence of the things that you want, concerns about what you are going to do in the future in a financial sense, or in some way which is reflective of the old way of thinking, of the old version of you, the version of you that had less understanding, that had less self-awareness, that is when you do this process. and at all other times, you can release and live your life as you live your life, knowing that for all of your wakeful moments, your emanation of the higher self, as it downloads and spontaneously becomes presence, it is passing through the lens on which is etched this blueprint of what it is that you desire to experience. So that is a very concise description we have given you. If we were to continue, we would be repeating ourselves. And at the moment of your capacity to translate our imagery and ideas and concepts into a language using what you have available, this is the extent that we can go to. So we will leave it here, and with encouragement say to you, continue to be vigilant of this process. Do it accurately. Over time, you will become more skilled, and it will become a second nature, because it is the way that you were designed. So it will become a second nature until eventually it will become your first nature, because this is who you are. This is the actual design of you, the energetic being having the physical experience. This is the correct operation of this apparatus, of this duality. So have fun with it. Do it often, when it's required, and ensure that the beginnings of this process is very, very well defined and clarified. And when we say defined and clarified, we don't mean, for example, that if you want a car, you have to know exactly which car that is. As in, the one car which now is owned by someone else living in some place, and it's going to be sold at this stage. We're not saying to that degree of precision. But what we say is, though, to understand what the model of the car is, what the colour of the car is, what the year of the car is. And for a house, again, it is not essential that you know exactly which house that is, which street, which suburb, which number, which floor in the building. That is not essential to know to that degree of precision. But instead, know it in this way. It is a house which is within a few hundred metres of the beach. It is at ground level, or it is high with a view. It is spacious. It has a balcony. Be very clear of the concept of what it is you desire. And that is precise enough. And we make this point because it is not enough to say, I want a house. You need more clarity than that. But then also, it's not essential for you to say, I want exactly, precisely that house. At the very beginning of this process, this is not essential, and this will have the tendency to activate old beliefs. So instead, keep it as a well-defined concept. So we shall stop here, and we give thanks this challenge, and also we appreciate the lucidity by which we were able to speak with you today. We feel that we can be very expressive in this session we've had with you now. It is very easy for us to be expressive of the ideas that we hold and wish to share with you in this session. So, well done, and you continue to improve your capacity to be very harmonic with us so that you can speak as the one being. Well done. Thank you. We love you. Do these practices, and we will speak with you again soon.